Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar where we are going to cover aspects in relation to the regulatory overview of the hemp in the food industry in India. We'll also do some comparison with other global regulatory positions as well while we go through the webinar. Before we start, let me just give you a quick introduction to the industry itself. And where we stand right now and what's the statistics, etc. So as we all know, the wonder plant cannabis has been grown in India since time immemorial, right? It's regarded to have great medicinal properties, but I think that most of us know it for its psychoactive and intoxicating effects. The legal status of cannabis and its derivatives are quickly evolving around the world. Now, in the West especially, it's available in many countries, both for medicinal as well as recreational purposes. There are numerous names by which cannabis is known around the world. One of them is, of course, hemp. The term hemp itself refers to Cannabis sativa cultivars, which is basically grown for industrial purposes. And it's characterized by lower levels of THC, or what is known as tetrahydrocannabinol, which is basically the active principle responsible for the psychotropic effects. It's used to produce a wide range of products like food, clothing, biodegradable plastics, oil, hemp seed oil, nutritional supplements, etc. Unlike other cannabis, hemp contains very less THC, which is 0.3%. And being a derivative of cannabis, it has a plethora of medical benefits without, of course, the psychoactive effects. Therefore, people have started consuming hemp in edible forms for its therapeutic benefits. It's also important to note that the hemp-based food attracts legal and regulatory considerations similar to other foods, along with the regulatory aspects which relate to cannabis itself. Presently in India, cannabis is controlled and regulated by the NDPS Act, which is the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. The NDPS Act regulates the recreational as well as medicinal use of cannabis. It provides stringent regulations and prohibits many activities pertaining to cannabis, and also provides stringent punishments. However, if you note, it is the FSSAI, or the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, which regulates hemp-based food in India. The recent, not so recent, but in November 2021, there was a notification which was issued by the FSSAI, which brought in the amendment to the food safety, which is the Food Safety and Standards, Food Products Standards and Food Additives, Fifth Amendment regulations in 2021, which provided standards for hemp seed oil, and hemp flour for selling it as a food or as an ingredient in a food subject to conforming standards. These regulations came into effect in 2022, in July 2022. In the past few years, we've also seen a notable change by states. States like Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh have also shown their support for the industry by legalizing the cultivation of cannabis in the states. Due to these legislative reforms, the hemp market has seen a substantial and remarkable growth in India. If we look at FDI, we don't see any kind of restriction, because the sale and purchase of cannabis itself does not explicitly form a part of the prohibited sectors list in the FDI policy, therefore implying that there is no embargo in investment. Of course, there is the slight dichotomy when it comes to agriculture. If it is for growing cannabis, then we will have to look at it carefully. If you look at the industry, and at least from an investment perspective, I think one of the most spoken about investment was the 2020 investment in this company called Hemp Street, which is an Ayurvedic cannabis integrated research and retail venture. there was a pre-Series A funding by a company, by a US-based pharma tech company called Pharmacon Holdings, and one of the largest private investor in the cannabis space in US and Canada, Roman Barberis. Globally as well, there's a lot of activity which has happened. I think the global industry is much larger than what the industry and the sector in India is. There are multiple deals which have happened. We've seen the likes of Tilray acquiring Manitoba Harvest. Tilray is a leading cannabis research, production, and distribution company. In 2019, they acquired Manitoba Harvest, which is one of the world's largest hemp food manufacturer and a leading foods company. It was a fairly large acquisition. I think it was close to around 300 million or a little above that. There are also private equity funds which look at this sector. A well-known fund is Inverleith, which is an Edinburgh-based private equity fund. They're invested in a company called Braham and Murray Good Hemp, which is a plant-based food and drink brand which manufactures products from hemp seed. So they had done a multi-million-dollar investment in 2018. Even statistically, if you look at it, I think the market research, for example, Grandview Research suggested that we're already at a $5.56 billion market in 2023 and expected to grow at a CAGR of close to around 17.5% from 2024 to 2030. So therefore, there is strong prospects when it comes to this sector. The rising product demand from industries such as agriculture, textiles, personal care, recycling, furniture, food and beverage, paper, construction materials is all projected to kind of ensure that this market, the growth will be propelled because of the various uses of hemp in the industry. Hemp is obviously, as we all know, increasingly being used in medicinal products and nutritional supplements. In fact, the high nutritional values and beneficial fatty acid and protein profile of hemp are driving the demand for hemp products in the market. So that's a very, quick, just touched upon largely the industry and what the, very broadly the regulatory framework is. But I'll let my colleagues, Swarna and Felina, kind of go deeper into the regulations and the industry, and also kind of talk about hemp itself and the classification and the differentiation from cannabis, etc. But before we do that, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Praveen Raju. I'm one of the founding partners of Spice Root Legal. I specifically look at healthcare, life sciences, and food as a sector. That's one of the sectors that the firm focuses on. We have a team of close to around 22 odd lawyers who look at that sector specifically, and we work across the sector, both when it comes to regulatory aspect. We help with licensing, we help with issues in relation to how to kind of go about the licensing regime and advice in relation to regulatory aspects in India as well as outside India. We help with commercial contracts in this space. We also help with transactional work, which includes both private equity, venture capital, as well as M&A transactions. And that is something that I have personally been doing for the last 20 odd years. The firm itself, we are close to 100 lawyer firm. We look at, like I said, that we have a sector-focused approach. We're based in 4 cities, Bombay, Bangalore being the primary cities, and we're based in Pune and Kochi as well. I'll let Swarna and Felina also give a quick introduction and take over the webinar from there.
Hi all, thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Praveen, for the introduction and overview of the hemp industry. I am Swarna Jain, Senior Associate at Spice Root Legal, working with the Healthcare, Pharma and Life Sciences team, having a focus on the food and nutraceutical sector.
Hi everyone, I'm Felina from Spice Root Legal, working with the Healthcare, Pharmaceutical and Life Sciences team, and also with a core focus in the food and nutraceutical sector specifically.
So before we delve into the use of hemp seeds in the food industry, let us first understand hemp.
Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry to interrupt you there, but just a quick note. I think I missed mentioning this. We have a Q&A box here. If you have any questions, please feel free to kind of pop in your questions over there. We'll either take it as we go along or, towards the end of the webinar. Sorry about that, Swarna. Carry on, carry on.
Yes, so as I was saying, let us first understand hemp as a part of or derivative of the cannabis plant. Cannabis is a generic term. It is used to denote the psychoactive preparations of cannabis plant, which grows wild in many parts of the world. And as Praveen said, it is known by numerous terms as well, such as marijuana, dagga, wheat, pot, hashish, or even hemp. Cannabis is a genus of flowering plant belonging to the family of Cannabiceae. This genus includes three different species, which is Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis rudrali. As we all know, cannabis plants have been used for thousands of years for recreational or medicinal or religious purposes, like medically to treat diseases or elevate symptoms under professional care, and even for recreational purpose to alter one's mental state in a way that modifies emotions, perceptions, and feelings regardless of the medical need. The extensive research has probably made cannabis the most studied plant in human history. And even according to WHO, World Health Organization, about 147 million people and 2.5% of the world population consume cannabis today, and which makes this cannabis plant the most commonly used illicit drug in the world. As I said, apart from the medical, recreational, or religious purpose, hemp is such an extraordinary crop that it is being used to produce food, textiles, biodegradable plastics, paper, paint, biofuel, animal feed, as well as lightning oil, to name a few. Various parts of the hemp plant represent a valuable source of food and ingredients for nutritional supplement. In 1938, the Popular Mechanics magazine defined hemp as the new billion-dollar crop, and it had about 30,000 different uses, which can be derived from the fiber and stalk of the plant. This actually happened just 1 year after its production was shuttered in the US with the passing of Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. As you know, we have been using the words hemp and marijuana interchangeably, and these are coming from the same variety of the cannabis, which is Cannabis sativa. They're different in the terms of their THC component. Let's first understand what is THC. THC is tetrahydrocannabinol. It's a psychoactive compound in cannabis that's found, and this is responsible for the high or the euphoric feeling often associated with the use of cannabis. It binds primarily to your CB1 receptors in the brain and nervous system, leading to various physiological or psychological effects, such as altered perceptions, relaxation, altered coordination, and even increased appetite. As I said, hemp typically contains 0.3% or less THC. And due to that low THC content itself, it is legal in many countries for cultivation and consumption. Whereas marijuana, on the other hand, is a plant which has more than 0.3 THC. And some plants may contain 35% of THC by dry weight, which results marijuana being illegal in many countries around the world. As I said before, hemp is one of the most versatile plant which is known to men, and it has been used for thousands of years to make food, rope, fabric, medicine, and many more. Whereas marijuana, on the other hand, is a variety of cannabis that is used for medical or recreational purposes as a psychotropic drug. Moving on, let's see the changing legislation of hemp around the world. Over the past few decades, to counteract the widespread use as a recreational drug, authorities across the world had banned cultivation of any variety of cannabis without making a distinction based on the THC content, which had severely and unfairly harmed the hemp industry. But there has been a significant change during the past few years, and most Western countries have now recognized the economic, the social, and industrial potential of hemp and even promoted its cultivation through legislative interventions, which have established the legal threshold of the THC concentration in this dry plant material. Like, let's see, European Union. The new Common Agriculture Policy, which was adopted in December 2021 by the European Council, introduced the possibility for farmers to receive direct payments for hemp varieties registered in EU catalog. This new policy had elevated the THC level for hemp from 0.2% to 0.3%, and this legislation took effect in 2023. When you see US, until December 2018, hemp was included in the definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act of 1971 and was subject to the same restrictions. There have been legislative changes which was enacted as a part of 2018 Farm Bill, which removed the long-standing federal restriction on the cultivation of hemp and is now no longer subject to as a controlled substance by the Drug Enforcement Administration and is now subject to regulation and oversight as an agriculture commodity by the US Department of Agriculture. This 2018 Farm Bill expanded the statutory definition of what constitutes or what is included in hemp. It now includes derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomer, as long as the THC concentration is not more than 0.3%. So all non-hemp cannabis or cannabis derivatives, including the marijuana-derived CBD, are considered to be marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act and will remain regulated by DEA. In India, in line with the thresholds under foreign laws, India has also set the THC requirement at 0.3% in the hemp-based food products. We've been saying that hemp is a versatile plant and have been used for thousands of years and grows in various climates and offers a multitudes of use, like its fiber, which can be used to transform into clothing materials, its seeds, which are a source of nutritious food, its oils, which are in high demand for their rich cannabinoid content in the production of beauty products. However, in the wellness world, there is a significant discussion surrounding the hemp products, which has led to some misconceptions as well and myths that needs clarification. The first myth that is surrounding is smoking industrial hemp gets a person high. Marijuana form of cannabis, sativa, contains the compound called delta-9 THC, which is responsible for its psychoactive properties. The THC level in comparison to industrial hemp is so low that no one could get high from smoking it. Moreover, hemp contains a comparatively high percentage of another cannabinoid, which is called CBD, that actually blocks the marijuana high. And hemp, as it turns out, is not only a marijuana, but it could be called anti-marijuana also. The other misconception that is surrounding is hemp is just another superfood. The word superfood is now used around a lot, but for hemp, it actually rings true. Like hemp is the only food source which contains an ideal ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. These omega oils cannot be made by human body, and hence it's deemed essential and must be consumed via diet. These are called good fats that promote cardiovascular health, and it combats bad cholesterol also. It has more protein than your flax or chia seeds, which is quite easily digested. The other misconception is that hemp is a protein for vegans. Hemp is full of proteins containing all the essential and non-essential amino acids, therefore making it great source for protein for everyone and not just limited to vegans. It is the ideal addition to many dishes and suitable for all diets because of the essential and non-essential amino acids. And even the proteins is made up of 65% of edestine, which is a highly digestible form of protein, and albumin, which is highest in the plant kingdom. So this was a brief overview of hemp and cannabis. I now hand it over to Felina, who will take you through the regulatory framework surrounding hemp in India.
Thank you, Swarna. But before we go into the legislations that govern hemp, let us first trace the evolution of the regulatory framework surrounding this plant. If we look at the historical use of hemp in India, the hemp plant holds immense historical and cultural significance in India and is integral to several Indian festivals such as Holi and Durga Puja. You can even see the reference to the use of hemp in medicinal and religious purposes in Hindu religious texts. Across the globe, there were various attempts to restrict the growth and usage of hemp. For instance, Egypt had introduced its first penal law against hemp use in 1800. Brazil had banned hemp in 1830. South Africa had enacted a law against possession of hemp in 1870. And even Greece had prohibited the cultivation, use, and export of hemp in 1890. However, in India, a notable departure from this trend came in with the Indian Hemp Drugs Commission's report of 1894. After an extensive study of hemp use in India, the report recommended against complete prohibition, arguing that it was already widespread across the country and a ban could lead to the use of more harmful substances. Instead, the report proposed regulating and taxing hemp through licensed production and sale, with an emphasis on moderate use rather than an unrestricted consumption and possession. Now, this perception changed in 1870 as the British became worried about the fatalistic consequences of ganja consumption in India and enacted the Opium Act of 1857 and 1878. However, the provisions under these regulations were not very regulated and contained very meager punishments for the offenses related to drugs. Therefore, the use of drugs in an uncontrolled manner continued for some time. It was only until an international peace treaty called the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961, where various signatory countries to the convention, such as the USA and the UK, had adopted a stricter approach towards curbing and getting control over the drug menace in these countries. With the rise in international standards and awareness, India, who had participated in the convention, observed that there was a requirement for the need to incorporate and adopt these measures in the form of substantial legislations which would serve the purpose in the domestic atmosphere. Also, India had taken part in the United Nations Conference on the adoption of the Convention on Psychotropic Substances in 1971 in Vienna. This convention aimed at tackling drug abuse all over the world, and in order to give effect to the international conventions on narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, India enacted the substantive legislation called the Narcotic and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985. The Act deals with the trafficking of prohibited substances, which includes the cultivation, manufacture, distribution, as well as consumption of prohibited substances, the narcotic drugs and substances. The Act classifies drugs into small, less than commercial, and commercial drugs and lists punishment based on this classification. The enactment also includes substances obtained from nature, such as marijuana, along with other narcotic and psychotropic drugs. A step forward to uproot drug trafficking in narcotic and psychotropic substances, India took part in the United Nations Convention Against Illicit Trafficking in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances, 1988. Also, at the 63rd sessions of the United Nations Convention on Narcotic Drugs held in 2020, India voted to remove cannabis and its resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Conventions on Narcotic Drugs that I talked about earlier, which placed cannabis along with other dangerous drugs such as heroin. The majority vote in favor of reclassifying cannabis opened the doors globally to recognizing the medicinal and therapeutic potential of the drug. Now that we've briefly looked at the evolution of the regulatory framework which led to the NDPS Act, let's now go into the specifics of the Act, which controls and regulates the use of cannabis or hemp in India. The legislation plays a crucial role in determining what parts of the cannabis plant are prohibited and punishable. Now, cannabis or hemp is classified into three categories. The first is charas, which includes the separated resin obtained from the cannabis plant, whether in crude or purified form, for example, hashish oil. Second is ganja, which is the flowering or fruiting top of the cannabis plant, which excludes the seeds and leaves when not accompanied by the tops. Therefore, we can observe from the Act that it specifically excludes the seeds and leaves of the cannabis plant from the prohibited parts. The third category is any mixture of the above two forms of cannabis or any drink which is prepared from them with or without any other neutral materials. Now, Section 8 of the Act outlines several prohibitions for cannabis, including prohibition on the cultivation of any cannabis plant and also a general prohibition on the production, manufacture, possession, sale, purchase, transportation, warehousing, use, consumption, import, export, and transshipment of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. There are exceptions to this rule for medicinal or scientific purposes, subject to the provisions of the Act and prohibited that the necessary licensing, permits and authorizations are obtained from the various regulatory authorities. Now, Section 10 of the Act also grants the central government the authority to empower the state governments to permit and regulate all the activities surrounding cannabis that I'd mentioned before. In particular, the state can define cultivation limits for cannabis plant, allowing only licensed cultivators authorized by the state to cultivate cannabis. It can also mandate the delivery of all cannabis produced from cultivated land to designated state government officers. They can also periodically set prices for cannabis delivered by cultivators and also prescribe forms and conditions for licenses and permits related to the various activities specified under the Act. Now, Section 20 of the Act deals with punishment for contravention in relation to cannabis plant, where whoever contravenes the prohibitions provided under the Act for hemp is to be punishable with imprisonment of up to 20 years and fine which can extend up to 2 lakh rupees. Now, further, as mentioned earlier, the NDPS Act regulates the import, export, or transshipment of all narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances in, out, or via India, including the territorial waters of India, and allows for importation only with valid permissions, licenses from the central government, and it also provides penalties for the illegal use. These include specific import authorizations from the Central Bureau of Narcotics and special permissions for use, like the drug manufacturing license or hospital trade license and the intended use declaration. The Act also empowers the central government to prescribe ports and other places which the narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances may be imported into India or exported from India or transshipped. Violations of these provisions, as I mentioned earlier, attract imprisonment of up to 20 years and fines up to 2 lakh rupees. Now, moving on, let's look at some of the judicial precedents surrounding the cannabis cultivation and manufacture. There have been some petitions which have been filed in various high courts of India for legalizing the cultivation of cannabis.
In the case of Great Legalization Movement India Trust versus Union of India, a petition was filed before the Delhi High Court, challenging the prohibition and criminalizing of cannabis under the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985. The petitioner argued that cannabis has various medicinal, industrial, and recreational benefits, and its ban violates the fundamental rights of citizens.
The center, while opposing the legalization of cannabis, responded that there is no complete ban on cannabis as its medicinal and scientific use is allowed under law. This matter is listed for further hearing on 22nd February 2024 next year. Now, similarly, in Himachal Pradesh, in the case of Dishinder Khanna versus State of Himachal Pradesh, another petition was filed to legalize the cultivation, processing, and use of industrial hemp and medicinal hemp, and to direct the government to frame a policy for the cultivation of only industrial and medicinal hemp. This matter is also listed next on 26 December 2023, this month. Apart from this, a committee was also appointed by the central government, by the state government of Himachal Pradesh in April 2023, which had recommended regulated cultivation of cannabis for medicinal, scientific, and industrial purposes. The committee submitted the report on 20th September 2023 on the issue of legalization of cannabis in a controlled environment. It highlighted the potential of cannabis to reduce carbon impact, treat diseases like cancer, etc., and also made certain recommendations. First was to amend the Himachal Pradesh NDPS rules of 1985 for permitting and regulating the cultivation, production, possession, and use of cannabis for medicinal and scientific purposes. The second was to introduce conditions for allowing the cultivation for cannabis for industrial purposes. The third was to develop SOPs for activities from cultivation to manufacture of the finished product, and also to constitute a state-level authority for providing a single window for making decisions regarding the cultivation of cannabis and development of seed banks of cannabis. Another public interest litigation was filed before the Bombay High Court in the case of Aditya Bartakur versus Department of Health and Family Welfare, wherein the petitioner submitted data to show the useful effects of cannabis on health and as a cure for illness, like I mentioned, such as cancer, and highlighted that several countries had legalized its sale and consumption.
The court, however, dismissed the PIL, stating that they were not experts in the field to examine the technical data presented by the petitioners regarding the useful effects of cannabis, and also under Article 226 of the Constitution of India, they could not direct the Parliament to frame rules. However, they did advise the petitioners to move a private bill in the Parliament.
Now, when we look at states which have legalized the cultivation of cannabis in India, as mentioned earlier under the NDPS Act, the state government in India has the power to make laws of cannabis, and they have allowed the use of bhang, which uses the seeds and leaves of cannabis. For instance, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan has authorized government licensed shops which sell bhang. On the contrary, the state of Assam, which under the Assam Ganja and Bhang Prohibition Act of 1958, prohibits the retail purchase, possession, and consumption of bhang in Assam.
When it comes to the cultivation of cannabis itself, the government of Uttarakhand has authorized the cultivation of cannabis for medicinal and scientific purposes, and has also authorized centers in Dehradun and Lucknow for testing the levels of THC in plants. They were the first state in India to legalize the cultivation of cannabis. On the other hand, the government of Uttar Pradesh has framed out a policy for issuing license only for research and development purposes.
The CSIR National Botanical Research Institute had initiated preliminary research activities under public-private partnership model with the Bombay Hemp Company. They have also involved in initiating R&D programs with the collaboration of the Manipur government for streamlining the cultivation of cannabis crop in Manipur for the rational and socio-economic upliftment. Since the conditions in these states are extremely favorable for the cultivation of these plants, this would also help in the increasing of jobs from the cultivation to the manufacturing activities in these states. Also in April 2017, the Ministry of Health and Welfare granted the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine a license to grow hemp on an acre of land in Jammu and Kashmir for medicinal purposes only. And also in 2020, February, India's first medical cannabis clinic was opened in Bangalore. This shows that there is an increasing support for policy change when it comes to cannabis, slowly but steadily. Now we're also going to look at the foreign investment in entities engaged in cannabis in India. The cultivation or sale of cannabis, as Praveen had mentioned, is not explicitly prohibited when it comes to the FDI policy, which implies that there's no restriction on the investment in cannabis-related entities from an FDI policy standpoint. Investment in cannabis and marijuana is not new to this world. Venture capitalist Peter Thiel's founder fund invested in the cannabis industry in 2015. Also, the well-known health and wellness brand Goop, owned by Oscar-winning actress Gwyneth Paltrow, is actively investing in the cannabis industry and selling CBD oil, which is a cannabis derivative with potential therapeutic and medicinal uses. Also, Harvard economist Jeffrey Myron estimates the legal and illegal cannabis market to be currently worth USD 14 billion. When we look at India, Praveen had mentioned the the 1 million funding in Hemp Street, which is an India-based startup. They also had received a biotechnology ignition grant by the Biotechnology Industry Research Assistant Council in 2021. This grant was for work on medicinal cannabis solution, which was the first in India. In 2017, a Mumbai-based medicinal research startup, Bombay Hemp Company Private Limited, which studies the medicinal use of cannabis, raised INR 6.25 crores from a group of investors, which was led by Ratan Tata. For the cannabis startup Hemp Horizons, which is a seed processing company registered with the US Food and Drugs Administration, raised 20 million rupees in February 2021 as part of its seed funding round led by the Mumbai Angels Network, with participation from renowned national and international angel investors. Separately, while this is not an illustration of inbound investment, it is pertinent to mention that in a bid to strengthen its position in the global medical cannabis industry, Indian pharmaceutical major Dr. Reddy's Laboratories in February 2022 had entered into a definitive agreement to acquire the German company Nimbus Health. Nimbus has been a major player in the field of cannabis-based medicines, and the company said that the acquisition will allow it to build on Nimbus Health's offerings and introduce cannabis-based medicines as a promising treatment for patients. This company would be operating as a wholly owned subsidiary of Dr. Reddy's. Now that we've looked at the NDPS Act and the regulatory framework and the judicial precedents as well of cannabis as a drug, handing it over to Swarna to take you through the regulations of cannabis or hemp as a food product, which is governed by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India.
Thank you, Felina, for your insights on the NDPS Act. As you know, the legal status of cannabis and its derivatives is quickly evolving around the world. It is now legally available in a number of countries for medicinal or recreational purposes. The products with cannabis ingredients are available in various forms, including dried plants, topical, or edible. The edible form of cannabis, which are consumed in food form, will have food-like legal and regulatory considerations. And that's why in 2017, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India had issued notices to various hemp manufacturers, highlighting that the manufacture and sale of these products under the FSSAI license number is illegal. The title of the order itself stated, illegal manufacture, import, sale of products made from hemp and hemp seeds by some companies using FSSAI number on its label. FSSAI had also issued letters to the e-commerce websites, platforms to remove all the hemp products from their websites. And they also issued a letter to authorities to keep a check on the sale of hemp products, inspect the premises and firms, and verify if the hemp products are being manufactured, stored, or sold by these firms. They had also added to initiate appropriate actions against the defaulting FBOs who are using the license number on the label of the products, selling the food which is made from hemp, which is governed under the FSS Act. However,
later, there was a paradigm shift in the view of FSSAI with respect to hemp-based food products.
And in November 2021, it recognized hemp seed and hemp seed products as food under the food additive regulations in 2021. This amendment came into effect on 1st June 2022. The regulation itself defined hemp seeds means the hulled or non-viable seeds obtained from cannabis sativa or other indigenous cannabis species. Where these terms, hull seeds means of seeds from which the outer coat or hull of seeds have been removed, or non-viable seeds are those which are not able to germinate. There are specific requirements for hemp seed and hemp seed oil or hemp seed flour to be sold as a food or food ingredient. However, the cultivation must comply with the NDPS Act, which Felina described. The level of cannabinol, which is CBD, in any food for sale consisting of hemp seed or seed product is now restricted to a maximum of 75 milligrams per kg. This is a significant victory for the entire hemp industry, as the FSSAI's recognition of hemp nutritional products will introduce a plethora of new products such as hemp milk made out of seeds, hemp-based protein bars, etc. The amendment regulation prescribed that hemp seeds from plants that have lesser than 0.3 THC are allowed to be used as food products, whereas such THC level shall not exceed 0.2% milligram per kg in any beverage. while maintaining the CBD levels at 75 milligrams per kg. The permissible limits in THC has been put on screen, which is prescribed under the Fifth Amendment regulation. One thing we would like to highlight here that, the food products containing hemp seed or seed products cannot be administered to infants up to an age of 24 months. Moving on, there was also a clarification issued by FSSAI in November of 2022, where it clearly stated that the order that was passed in 2017 has been superseded by this Fifth Amendment regulation. And it clarified that hemp seed and seed products have been standardized under the sub-regulation or 2.16 of hemp food additive regulations. And such products are now allowed to be listed on e-commerce website with the FSSAI license number and should comply with the standards that are prescribed under the regulations. I would now ask Felina to throw some light on the labeling regulations of these hemp seed products. Over to you, Felina.
So there are several labeling requirements provided by the FSSAI when it comes to hemp food products. The food for sale that consists of hemp seed or seed products cannot be labeled or presented for sale in a form that suggests that it has a psychoactive effect. The label for the food also cannot have certain claims, like it cannot have a nutrient content claim about cannabidiol or a health claim about cannabidiol. It also can't have an image or representation of any part of the cannabis plant, including the leaf of the plant other than the seed. Also, the word cannabis, marijuana, or any other words of similar meaning cannot be used on the label. The label for the food which contains the hemp seed or seed product will have to only mention the word hemp. The flour which is prepared after the hemp seed has been pressed to extract oil will have to be legibly labeled as de-oiled hemp seed flour. So these are a few of the labeling requirements which have been provided by the FSSAI when it comes to hemp food products. We're also going to look at a brief of the regulatory framework surrounding hemp in several other countries as well, apart from India. When we look at the European Union, the hemp plant was subjected to novel food approval in the European Union before. However, in June 2023, the European Union's novel food catalog was amended and hemp food was removed from the ambit of novel food and is now considered as a traditional food. When we look at United Kingdom, the CBD extract products are considered across the UK as novel foods. The Food Standards Agency, which is the government department agency for food safety in England, were of the view that CBD extracts fall within the scope of UK's novel food regulations, and therefore CBD food product business operators are required to submit novel food applications for products to the authorities for approval. In the United States, the Agricultural Improvement Act, which is also known as the 2018 Farm Bill, as Swarna had briefly touched about, legalized hemp as an agricultural commodity with a concentration of THC of no more than 0.3%. Hemp was removed from the Controlled Substances Act, which meant that cannabis plants and derivatives containing no more than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis were not controlled substances under federal law. The FDA treats products containing cannabis or cannabis-derived compounds as it does any other FDA-regulated product, and therefore they do not require a pre-market approval from the FDA. However, it is important to note that the FDA has consistently declared that CBD cannot be lawfully marketed in food and dietary supplements because the cannabis-derived compound was first studied as a drug. And they have issued warnings to several companies who have used CBD in their food and dietary supplements. When we look at Canada, hemp is regulated under the Industrial Hemp Regulation, which was enacted under Canada's Cannabis Act. The hemp regulations in Canada are very comprehensive and provides for obtaining of license for conducting the authorized activities to sell industrial hemp, import, export hemp seed or grains, cultivate industrial hemp, propagation of industrial hemp, and several other activities comprehensively under the hemp seed regulations. So these are a brief of the regulations governing hemp in other countries. Now that we have a brief understanding of the entire regulatory framework surrounding in hemp, the conclusion is that hemp has obvious benefits, and specifically various health benefits, such as helping in maintaining blood pressure of individuals, improving the heart health, managing inflammatory conditions, managing skin conditions, etc. And therefore, by including hemp-based foods into the FSSAI regulatory framework, this indicates that the government has modified the regulations as per the needs of the market, and has accepted it on a global scenario that hemp is something that becomes very important when it comes to several benefits that it provides to us. However, there are some challenges associated with regulating cannabis and hemp in the food industry, such as establishing quality standards and sharing consumer education with the population in general in India. There is also a need for transparent policies, considering that there is an interplay with the NDPS Act and the FSSAI regulations. In a recent news articles, it was observed that many hemp-based food products are facing difficulties in listing their food products on e-commerce platforms. Thus, even after the clarification by FSSAI in 2022, as Swarna had mentioned, e-commerce platforms are reluctant to bring hemp-based food products on their website. This is an example of the hassles faced by hemp-based food manufacturers and FBOs. Thus, there is a need to encourage dialogue among stakeholders, policymakers, and industrial players to create a balanced and more effective regulatory framework. Apart from this, one major issue is that the regulatory framework for hemp-based food products for animals and pets is not really fully fledged in India. Many hemp-based food products for animals and pets can be seen in the market. However, there is no stringent regulatory framework for regulating of food for pets in India. For the pet food industry, the Bureau of Indian Standards in 2019 had introduced the IS 11968 for pet foods given to only dogs and cats, and not even for any other pets, not for any other pets. However, even these standards are completely voluntary in nature, and therefore the businesses that are adding hemp-based animal food into the market are without any regulations by the FSSAI. Therefore, there needs to be laws on precise limits on the content of THC and CBD in pet food and its permissibility in the market. Therefore, this sector needs specific laws when it comes to these specific content limits, and also a brief understanding of what these requirements are, what sort of labeling requirements need to be provided for pet foods also, and not just restricted to dogs and cats, but also for other pets that people have. Therefore, we understand from all this that there is a need for better framework surrounding hemp food products. But given that there are several upcoming judgments surrounding the legalization for the cultivation of hemp, we believe that based on the outcome of these judgments, it may open the door for more players to enter the market, and therefore this could result in a more evolved regulatory framework surrounding hemp food. Therefore, we're looking forward to these judgments to see how they take the hemp industry forward.
Thank you, Swarna. Thank you, Felina. I think that's a very detailed overview of the hemp food industry as well as the regulatory framework in India. And as Felina concluded, I think there's a step forward that we have taken when it comes to the regulatory framework. But there are challenges both at a regulatory level as well as both at an industry level in relation to the stigma surrounding hemp. And, I think it's also the confusion that the industry has when it comes to hemp and cannabis, otherwise, which is more, which is regulated under the NDPS Act. But I believe that what we believe is that there is a lot of activity which is happening in the market right now. We can see a lot of industry players who are reaching out to us and asking us relevant questions around the regulatory framework, as well as, the licensing regime, of course. And again, I think that there is a lot of interest, while subdued in some form, but we can see interest kind of picking up in the investor market as well. India has always kind of, like I mentioned in the beginning, cannabis as a plant has been grown and consumed in various forms in India at time immemorial. So therefore, the ability for India to cultivate and to kind of create a large market for hemp-based products is very possible. And there's a there's a strong chance that we could be one of the leaders in the industry. I'm just looking at questions. I don't think there are any specific questions, but if there's anything, please feel free to kind of write to us, send us. Our contact details are over here. You can write to us or send us an email. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.